Emily Dawson never expected her life to change so completely when she started her first job at a mid-sized company in downtown Cleveland. Fresh out of college, she felt nervous, eager, and a little lost. Michael Harris, an administrator a few years older than her, became her anchor without even trying. He showed her how to navigate the company systems, explained things patiently, and never once made her feel small. Their connection started as quiet mentorship and over time slipped into easy conversations over coffee, long walks after work, and finally something deeper. Michael wasn't flashy or loud. He was steady, thoughtful, and when he relaxed, surprisingly funny. They loved the same kind of music songs that told stories and shared a fondness for aimless road trips and cooking together at the end of long days. Within a year, they had moved into a small but warm apartment built on simple routines and shared respect. Michael had only one quirk that everyone noticed. He never touched alcohol. At parties, he would smile and decline beer or wine without judgment. "I'm an athlete," he'd explain. "Been boxing since I was 7. My body doesn't handle alcohol well. Honestly, I don't even like the smell." Emily admired that discipline. To her, it meant self-control and commitment, qualities she valued deeply. As the relationship matured, talk of marriage came naturally. Emily's parents, Patricia and George Dawson, had known for months that she was serious about Michael. They were eager to meet him, so one Saturday she brought him to their home on the east side of Cleveland. Patricia welcomed him with a table full of roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and her famous apple pie. George poured drinks and asked questions about Michael's job, hobbies, and future plans. Michael answered politely and easily, speaking of early morning runs along Lake Erie, quiet evenings, and his love for hiking. Patricia noticed the way he looked at Emily, protective and warm. But when she asked about his family, something shifted. Michael's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he smoothed it over. "They're in another part of Ohio," he said lightly. "Not much to tell. We don't see each other often." He quickly turned the conversation to George's work. Patricia exchanged a glance with George, then with Emily. It wasn't suspicion so much as curiosity. Why had Emily never met his family? Emily noticed the change too. For the first time, she realized there was a part of Michael's life she knew almost nothing about, a silence he guarded fiercely. Winter had barely lifted when Patricia began picturing Emily's wedding. She talked of flowers, the first dance, champagne toasts, and George pretended not to care even as he smiled at her excitement. To them, a wedding wasn't just a ceremony, it was a celebration of family and tradition. Michael, though, saw it differently. One evening, over takeout in their apartment, he said carefully, "What would you think about keeping the wedding small? Just us, maybe a few close friends. Courthouse, simple dinner afterward. No limos, no banquet halls." Emily tilted her head. She'd imagined something modest too, but still with music, family, photographs. "Small, sure," she said. "But you mean no reception at all?" Michael shrugged. "Why spend money feeding 100 people we barely know? We could use that for a honeymoon or a down payment on a house, something that actually matters for our future." His reasoning was practical, even romantic in its own way. But when Emily told her parents, Patricia gasped. "No reception? Absolutely not. Emily, you deserve a proper wedding. We'll pay for it ourselves." George nodded. "It's not just about you, sweetheart. It's about family too. About honoring the commitment you're making." Emily stood torn between their wishes and Michael's. She wanted to respect him, but she couldn't ignore the sparkle in her mother's eyes or the determination in her father's voice. That weekend, as they folded laundry, she tried again. "My parents really want a bigger wedding," she said gently. "They're even willing to pay. It's important to them." Michael's hand stilled, a t-shirt caught mid-fold. He set it down, exhaling. "Emily, my parents won't be there." She blinked. "What do you mean you haven't even told them the date yet?" "I don't need to," he said, turning away. "They won't come. That's just how it is." "But Michael," she pressed. "This is your wedding too. Don't you want your family there? Your mom? Your dad? Anyone? He shook his head, jaw tight. It's not possible. They're busy. Let's just leave it at that. The explanation was thin. It wasn't that his parents couldn't come, life had obstacles. Everyone understood that. It was the way he shut down the conversation, refusing even the smallest detail, as though the subject itself were forbidden. Emily tried to smile to let it go. But later that night, lying awake beside him, she couldn't. Weddings were about union, two families coming together, not just two people signing papers. Why was he so determined to keep his side in the shadows? Emily told herself not to push. He would open up when he was ready. Yet the questions lingered, soft but insistent. Why had she never met his family? Why did he never call them? Never mention their names? What was he hiding behind that calm, steady face? The unease in Emily's chest only grew as the weeks passed. Michael remained the same gentle, attentive partner, helping with dinner, laughing at their private jokes, folding laundry without complaint, but now she saw shadows behind his eyes. He never brought up his parents again, and whenever Emily hinted at the topic, he deflected with a soft smile or a change of subject. One evening, Michael mentioned a short business trip to another Ohio town. It wasn't unusual, his job sometimes sent him out of Cleveland for administrative work. He asked if she wanted to come along, but Emily declined, saying she had reports to finish. He kissed her forehead the next morning and left before dawn with a small overnight bag. Emily watched the taxi pull away, her heart pounding. She had already made her decision. That evening, tidying up the apartment, she found what she'd been looking for. In the glove compartment of Michael's car, tucked between insurance papers and old mail, sat a folded envelope addressed to Carol Harris in Youngstown. The name jolted her memory. Michael had only once slipped and mentioned his mother's first name, Carol. Emily stared at the envelope. This was the address he'd hidden the link to the family he refused to talk about. She held it for a long time, debating. It felt like trespassing, but her curiosity burned hotter than her guilt. Finally, she slipped the paper into her purse. The next morning, Emily packed a small bag, told her parents she'd be running errands outside Cleveland, and set her GPS to Youngstown. The highway stretched long and flat before her, the winter sun pale and cold on the windshield. As the miles rolled by, the scenery shifted from the bustle of Cleveland's suburbs to the grayer, quieter edges of Ohio's Rust Belt. Empty warehouses with broken windows loomed along the road. Old factories sat abandoned, their smokestacks pointing like jagged fingers at the sky. Closer to Youngstown, the decline was impossible to miss. Houses sagged against one another, porches caving in, windows boarded. A liquor store buzzed faintly, even in daylight, its neon sign flickering. Across from it, a half-shuttered diner leaned beneath a faded awning. Emily tightened her grip on the wheel. She had grown up in a stable neighborhood with trimmed lawns and friendly neighbors. Here, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by a stray dog's bark or thudding music from a passing car. Her GPS directed her off the main road into a narrow street pitted with potholes. Yards were overgrown, fences splintered and falling apart. A rusted pickup sat on blocks, its tires missing. Laundry flapped stiffly on a line worn nearly colorless. Emily slowed, her heart pounding. This was the world Michael had left behind, the world he had never wanted her to see. She thought about his refusal to drink, his avoidance of family talk, his insistence that his parents wouldn't come to the wedding. In this landscape, his silence began to make sense. Emily parked near a corner store with a sagging roof and stared at the address on the paper. Her stomach twisted. She loved Michael. She trusted him, but she couldn't build a marriage on shadows. Taking a deep breath, she started the engine again and drove deeper into the neighborhood. Each turn seemed to lead further into abandonment. A child's tricycle lay overturned in a yard choked with weeds. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled long and mournful. The closer she came to the address, the heavier her chest felt. This was no longer about curiosity. It was about truth. The truth behind the man she loved. Finally, she saw the number painted crookedly on a cracked mailbox, Harris. Emily's breath caught. She pulled the car to the curb and turned off the ignition. For a long moment, she didn't move. The house sagged under its own weight. The porch was littered with beer cans. The curtains were yellowed and stiff. She closed her eyes, inhaled once, then opened the car door. Cold air bit her cheeks as she stepped out, the sound of her boots crunching against gravel far too loud in the empty street. She climbed the creaking porch steps. The smell hit her first stale beer, sour liquor, something acrid clinging to the boards. For a moment she almost turned back. But she knocked. At first there was no response, only the muffled drone of a television inside. She knocked again, louder. A voice barked from within, low and irritable. The door cracked open to reveal a woman who looked older than her years. Her hair was matted, her face blotched, and tired eyes rimmed red. A faded bathrobe hung from her thin shoulders, stained with food and liquor. She squinted suspiciously. "What? If you're from the electric company, I told you I don't have it. Shut it off. No TV, no fridge, doesn't matter." Her words slurred slightly, a bottle of cheap vodka dangling from one hand. Emily's heart raced. I'm looking for Carol Harris," she said carefully. "You found her?" Carol's gaze sharpened, scanning Emily from head to toe. "Who are you and what do you want?" Before Emily could answer, a young voice rang out from deeper inside. "Mom, leave her alone. She's not the power company." A girl appeared in the hallway, thin, maybe 12, dark blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, eyes startlingly green. She carried herself with a defiance far too old for her age. "Go back to your room." Lily Carroll snapped, her words coated with bitterness. But Lily didn't move. "You're just going to try to take her money like you always do," the girl shot back. "Shut your mouth." Carol lurched toward her, swaying. "You sold my jacket for booze. You sold the new boots Michael bought me. You'd sell the phone too if I let you." "That's why he doesn't come here anymore," Lily spat. The words hit Emily like a slap. Michael's name spoken with such anger, such raw hurt. Carol's face twisted, equal parts shame and rage. "Don't you talk about your brother like you know him. You don't know what he's done for this family." Lily's hands clenched at her sides, her small chest rising and falling with quick, shallow breaths. "You've done nothing but drink. Daniel's gone, and Michael hates this place because of you. When I grow up, I'm leaving too." Her voice cracked, but her eyes didn't waver. Emily stood frozen, her mind spinning. She had come searching for answers, and here they were, ugly, raw, spilling out before her. Carol suddenly turned back to Emily, her expression hardening. "You, whoever you are, don't belong here. Get off my property." She yanked the door closed, the slam reverberating through the brittle walls. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Emily stood on the porch a moment longer, her breath visible in the fading light. Through a cracked window she glimpsed Lily retreating down the hallway, her small frame hunched against the chaos inside. Emily's stomach twisted. Whatever Michael had tried to bury, whatever silence he had built between his past and his present, it was real. And it was darker than she had imagined. The door had barely slammed when Lily bolted out the side of the house, sneakers pounding the cracked sidewalk. Instinct pulled Emily forward. She couldn't leave the girl alone, not after what she'd just witnessed. "Lily, wait," she called, her voice catching in the cold afternoon air. The girl didn't slow. She darted down the street, slipping between two leaning houses, moving with surprising speed. Emily hurried after her, boots crunching over gravel and broken glass. Her heart raced, not just from the chase but from the gnawing sense that if she let Lily disappear now, she might never find the truth Michael had spent his life hiding. Several blocks later, the road opened into a clearing. An old convenience store squatted on the corner, its sign faded and its windows grimy. Beyond it, a narrow dirt path wound toward a stretch of water glinting faintly in the pale sun. Emily spotted Lily heading in that direction, shoulders stiff, hands shoved into her jacket pockets. Emily ducked into the store first, the bell over the door giving a weak jingle. Inside, the air was stale, lined with dusty shelves of canned soup and a cooler humming with soda and cheap beer. She grabbed a packet of cookies, a stick of beef jerky, and a few brightly wrapped lollipops from a jar by the counter. The cashier, an older man with weary eyes, rang her up without comment. When Emily stepped back outside, Lily was waiting at the edge of the path, arms crossed, those piercing green eyes narrowed. "Why are you following me?" she demanded. Emily held up the bag. "I thought you might want something to eat, that's all." For a moment, Lily didn't move. Then, with a shrug that tried to look careless but carried the weight of exhaustion, she turned toward the lake. "Fine. But I'm not going back home right now." Emily followed her down the path. It led to a small lake ringed by bare trees and scattered rocks. The water was calm, reflecting the washed-out sky. Lily sat on a fallen log near the bank, pulling her knees to her chest. Emily sat a few feet away, opening the bag and setting the snacks between them. "Here," she said softly. "Take whatever you like." Lily eyed the cookies, then reached for one. She bit into it slowly, face unreadable. After a moment, she took a lollipop too, rolling the stick between her fingers. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft lapping of water against the shore. Emily didn't rush it. She knew better than to push. Finally, Lily spoke. Her voice was quieter now, stripped of the defiance she'd shown her mother. "You're not from around here. I can tell. Why did you come?" Emily hesitated. The truth pressed against her chest. I know your brother, Michael." At the sound of his name, Lily's head snapped up. Her eyes widened, then narrowed with suspicion. "You're lying." "I'm not," Emily said quickly. "I'm engaged to him. We're supposed to get married soon." For a long moment, Lily just stared. Then slowly, her shoulders dropped. "So, that's why he showed up?" she murmured, looking back at the water. "He doesn't talk about us, does he?" Emily shook her head gently. "No, he never has. That's why I came. I wanted to understand." Lily gave a sharp laugh, one that didn't carry any humor. "Of course he doesn't. Why would he? This place, my mom. It's nothing he'd want you to see." Emily stayed quiet, letting the girls' words come on their own. Lily picked at the wrapper of her lollipop, then began, her voice low but steady. "Michael used to come home a lot back when Daniel was still alive. He tried to help, tried to take care of things, but Mom, she was always drinking, selling whatever she could for booze jackets, shoes, even my school supplies. Michael stopped bringing stuff because she'd just traded away. He hated it here, hated her. But he loved us, especially Daniel." Her throat tightened and she paused. Emily's heart clenched. She could hear the truth pressing at the edges of Lily's voice, a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to bear. "Daniel was different," Lily whispered. "He was strong. He always protected me, even from Mom's boyfriends. But one night, one of them came after her with a knife. Daniel stepped in." She stopped, staring at the lake, as though the water itself might swallow the memory. "He didn't make it." Emily's chest ached. She wanted to reach out to put a hand on Lily's shoulder, but she didn't. The girl wasn't asking for comfort. She was telling her story because no one else would. "That's why Michael doesn't come back," Lily said, finally turning those green eyes on Emily. "He blames himself. He thinks if he'd been here, Daniel would still be alive. But he couldn't save him. He couldn't save any of us." The wind rippled across the lake, carrying the bitter smell of smoke from somewhere in the distance. Emily swallowed hard. In that moment, she understood why Michael never drank, why he never mentioned his family, why he shut down whenever she asked. His silence wasn't pride or secrecy. It was grief. And sitting beside Lily, Emily knew the truth she had uncovered was only the beginning. The wind off the lake carried a damp chill, and Emily pulled her coat tighter but stayed where she was. Lily sat hunched on the log, elbows on her knees, staring at the water as though the stories trapped inside her would only come out if she kept her eyes fixed on something steady. "There were 4 of us." Lily began, her voice flat, but edged with a bitterness too old for a 12-year-old. "My oldest sister is Sarah. She got married before she even finished high school. She's got kids now, a couple of them, maybe more. We don't see her much. Then there's Michael. Then Daniel. He was only a year younger than Michael. And then me. Emily's breath caught. She could picture Michael as an older brother, protective and steady. But Daniel, his name hung in the air like a ghost. Sarah's always been kind of a mess, Lily went on. She married this guy who drinks almost as much as Mom. Sometimes they fight. Sometimes they make up. Sometimes the police come. Social services showed up once, almost took her kids. She cleaned up just long enough to keep them, but it never really changes. She picked a thread on her jeans and tore it free. Michael left as soon as he could. He went to community college in Cleveland, started working, tried to make a life for himself. He'd come back on weekends, bring us food or clothes. He always worried about me and Daniel. He'd yell at Mom, try to make her stop drinking, but it never stuck. She'd just wait until he was gone, and then start again. Emily swallowed hard, trying to keep her expression neutral even as her stomach twisted. Daniel was different, Lily whispered. He stayed. He tried to hold things together, especially when Michael was away. He protected me, even from Mom. And he really believed he could save her. Her voice cracked. Emily waited, letting the silence hold space. One winter, a couple years ago, Mom was with this guy. His name was Tony. He was mean. Always drunk. Always angry. One night he came after her with a knife. I don't even know what they were fighting about. Something stupid, probably. Daniel jumped in. He tried to get between them. Tried to stop Tony. He got stabbed before anyone could do anything. The words hit Emily like a blow. She covered her mouth, horrified. By the time the ambulance came, it was too late. Lily continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel bled out on the floor. Michael wasn't here that weekend. He couldn't make it back because of a snowstorm. He said later that if he'd been here, Daniel wouldn't have died. He screamed at Mom at the funeral. Told her she'd killed him. And maybe she did. If she hadn't let Tony into our lives, Daniel would still be alive. Emily blinked back, tears, her throat tight. She could almost see it, the cramped living room, the shouting, the flash of a knife, Daniel collapsing, while his little sister watched. Michael never came back after that, Lily said. Not really. He showed up one last time to pack his things and to make sure I had what I needed. He gave me a card, opened a bank account for me, put money in whenever he could, but he wouldn't step inside the house again. He told Mom if she brought another man around, he'd call the cops and have him locked up. And I believed him. Everyone did. People around here don't mess with Michael anymore, but he still won't come back. Lily finally turned to look at Emily. Her eyes were wet but hard, daring Emily to deny her story. That's why he doesn't drink. That's why he never talks about us. He hates alcohol, hates what it does, hates her. And he blames himself every single day for Daniel. Emily's chest ached. She wanted to gather the girl into her arms to tell her it wasn't Michael's fault, that no one could have stopped a storm or changed that night. But she understood now why Michael had built such thick walls around his past. Every sip of liquor, every shadow of that house carried the memory of blood on the floor and the brother he couldn't save. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The lake shimmered dully, the sun sliding lower, casting the world in shades of gray. Emily stared at the water, trying to absorb the weight of what she had just heard. She thought about the man she knew, the man who laughed softly when she burned pancakes, who folded laundry without complaint, who kissed her hand in passing as though it was the most natural thing in the world. And now, beneath all of that, she saw the grief he carried like a second skin. It wasn't shame that kept him silent. It was pain. Pain so deep he couldn't bear to name it. Emily closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. For the first time, she fully understood why Michael never raised a glass, never let himself relax when others lost themselves in drink. For him, alcohol wasn't a casual indulgence. It was the reason his family had fallen apart, the reason his brother was buried in the ground, the reason he kept Lily at arm's length, though he loved her fiercely. And for Emily, the truth was both devastating and clarifying. The silence that had once unsettled her now made heartbreaking sense. The drive back to Cleveland felt longer than the drive out, though the distance was the same. The highway stretched on endlessly, but Emily's mind was heavier now, weighed down by what she had learned at the lake. Lily's voice replayed in her head, flat, matter-of-fact, yet filled with wounds so deep they would never fully close. 4 siblings. A mother consumed by addiction, a brother buried too young, and Michael caught in the middle of it all, carrying guilt that was never his to bear. Emily tightened her grip on the steering wheel. For years she had wondered about Michael's silence, his refusal to speak of family, his unyielding avoidance of alcohol. Now she understood. Every sip of whiskey or beer didn't just remind him of the chaos he had escaped, it dragged him back to the night he lost Daniel. His abstinence wasn't discipline alone, it was survival. The city skyline came into view, the familiar outlines of Cleveland rising against the fading afternoon sky. Emily's chest ached with conflicting emotions. She loved Michael more deeply than ever, knowing now the strength it had taken for him to build a new life. But she couldn't ignore the girl she had left behind, Lily, with her fierce green eyes and brittle courage still stuck in that collapsing house, still bracing against the chaos that had already stolen too much from her. When Emily stepped into her parents' home that evening, Patricia noticed the shadow in her daughter's eyes at once. Dinner sat waiting on the table. Roast chicken, potatoes, the comforting smells of a safe and steady household, but Emily couldn't taste any of it. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Patricia asked softly, touching her hand. Emily hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing you can fix, Mom. I've been thinking about the wedding." George looked up from his plate, curious. "Changed your mind about the big party already?" His tone was light, but there was an edge of surprise. Emily drew a steady breath. "Yes. I don't want the big wedding. I don't need the banquet halls, the limousines, or the flowers. What I want is simple. Just Michael, me, and the people who matter most, and that means Lily should be there." The room fell quiet. Patricia's brows knit in confusion. "Lily, she's his little sister," Emily explained, her voice trembling slightly. "I met her. She deserves better than the life she's stuck in. She deserves to see her brother start fresh, to know she's not forgotten." George leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Emily, we don't even know this girl. Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Emily interrupted, her tone firm. She glanced between them, her parents' familiar faces lined with concern. "You've given me everything: stability, safety, love. Lily has none of that. If Michael and I are starting a new life, I want her to be part of it, not left behind." Patricia exchanged a glance with George, her expression softening. "You really care about her?" Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "She's just a child, Mom. She's had to grow up too fast. Michael won't admit it, but he's been keeping her afloat from a distance, and I can't marry him while pretending she doesn't exist. Our wedding should be about love and family, and she is his family." Silence lingered for a moment. Then Patricia reached across the table, squeezing Emily's hand. "If this is what you want, then we'll support you no matter what." George sighed, shaking his head slowly, but there was no anger in his eyes, only resignation and a trace of pride. "All right. No grand wedding. If bringing this girl into your life makes you happy, then that's what we'll do." Relief washed over Emily. For the first time since she had left Youngstown, she felt a sliver of hope. The road ahead would be complicated. Michael's pain wouldn't vanish overnight, and Lily's world couldn't be repaired with a single gesture. But Emily knew one thing with certainty. Love wasn't just about sharing joy. It was about shouldering burdens together, about refusing to turn away from the people who needed you most. That night, as she lay awake in her childhood bedroom, Emily imagined a wedding not filled with glittering chandeliers or endless guest lists, but a small circle of people who truly mattered. She pictured Michael standing beside her steadier than ever, and Lily shy but present, watching her brother begin a life where the shadows of their past no longer defined them. And for the first time, Emily felt peace. Not because the questions were gone, but because she finally knew the answers. The days slipped by as spring edged closer. Emily found herself restless, unable to keep the truth she had uncovered locked away any longer. Each time she looked at Michael, his steady hands making coffee, his calm voice discussing their future, she saw the shadows behind his eyes. She carried Lily's words inside her like a secret too heavy to bear. One evening, as they sat together at the kitchen table, Emily folded her hands tightly and took a breath. "Michael," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." He looked up, distracted at first, then weary when he noticed the tension in her voice. "What is it?" "I went to Youngstown." Her words landed like stones on the table between them. For a moment he said nothing. Then his face drained of color, his mouth parting in shock. "You what?" His chair scraped against the floor as he pushed back. "Emily, why would you? How could you?" "I met Lily." The name seemed to freeze him. His hand trembled against the edge of the table. "You shouldn't have gone there," he whispered, his voice sharp with panic. "You don't know what that place is like. You don't know what she's been through. What I've been trying to keep you away from. You weren't supposed to see any of it." Emily reached across the table, her fingers brushing his arm. "Michael, listen to me. I do know now. I saw the house. I saw Carol. And I talked to Lily. She's just a child, Michael. She needs you. And she needs to know she's not forgotten." He pulled back as though her touch burned. His breathing quickened, his eyes dark and frantic. "You don't understand. I've kept you away from that world for a reason. It's toxic. It destroys everything it touches. I promised myself I'd never drag you into it." Her voice steadied, calm against the storm rising in him. "I understand more than you think. I know about Daniel. Lily told me." Michael flinched as if struck. His jaw tightened, and for a long moment he stared at her in silence. Then slowly he sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with the weight of memories he had never shared. "I should have been there," he said hoarsely. "If I hadn't stayed in Cleveland that weekend, if I had just pushed through the storm, Daniel would still be alive. He wouldn't have had to fight alone. I failed him, Emily. I failed my brother." Emily's eyes blurred with tears, but her voice remained firm. "It wasn't your fault. You couldn't have stopped that night. No one could. You didn't fail him, Michael. You were a kid yourself. You've carried this guilt for years, but it doesn't belong to you." He shook his head violently. "You don't know what it's like to live with that picture in your head. The blood, the screaming. My mother, too drunk to even realize what had happened until it was too late. I told myself I'd never go back, that I'd cut it off forever. It's the only way I've survived." Emily leaned closer, her hand resting gently over his clenched fists. "Survival isn't enough. Lily is still there. She looks up to you. She loves you. And whether you like it or not, she is part of our life now. When we get married, I want her there. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because she is your family. Our family." Michael lifted his eyes, red-rimmed and raw. "You really mean that?" "I do," Emily whispered. "We can't change the past, but we can change the future for her, for us, for Daniel's memory. Don't you think he would want that?" Michael swallowed hard, his body trembling as if every word had cracked open the wall he had built. At last he nodded, his voice barely audible. Yes, he would. Silence settled, but it was no longer heavy with secrets. For the first time, Michael allowed his pain to be seen, and Emily, steady and unflinching, held it with him. In that moment, the wedding stopped being about parties or traditions. It became about redemption, about building a family, not defined by the brokenness of the past, but by the choice to stand together in the present. On a bright Saturday morning in late spring, Emily and Michael stood together at the Mahoning County Courthouse. There was no grand aisle, No orchestra, no sweeping floral arrangements, just sunlight streaming through tall windows bouncing off polished floors and the low hum of a clerk preparing their paperwork. Emily wore a cream-colored dress that brushed her knees, elegant in its simplicity. Michael stood beside her in a navy suit, his posture straight, but his hands trembling slightly. When the judge asked them to join hands, Emily felt the strength of his grip, the quiet determination that had carried him through so much darkness. The ceremony was brief. A handful of vows spoken softly, signatures scrawled across paper, and then it was done. They were husband and wife. Emily's parents clapped Patricia, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. George cleared his throat, gruffly hiding emotion behind formality. Two of Michael's closest friends from work offered warm congratulations. But the moment that struck deepest was when Lily, dressed in a borrowed floral dress and sandals that Emily had bought her just days before, stepped forward. She looked small, almost fragile, yet her eyes shone with pride. "You look beautiful," she whispered to Emily before throwing her arms around Michael. He bent down, holding her close, his face buried in her hair. For the first time in years, he let himself believe that family didn't have to mean pain. After the courthouse, they all walked to a small diner just down the street. It wasn't fancy vinyl booths, chrome stools, the smell of bacon and coffee lingering in the air, but it felt right. They filled a corner table with laughter and plates of pancakes, omelets, and burgers. Emily's best friend snapped photos on her phone, capturing moments more genuine than any staged portrait. Michael cutting a piece of cake with Lily grinning beside him. Patricia showing the girl how to stir cream into her coffee. George leaning back with a rare smile as he watched his daughter glow with happiness. Later, as the plates were cleared and coats gathered, Michael pulled Emily aside. He held a small envelope, documents tucked neatly inside. "I already talked to a lawyer," he said, his voice low but steady. "I want to start the process of becoming Lily's guardian. CPS will need to evaluate and there'll be court hearings, but I don't want her left in that house any longer than she has to be." Emily's eyes brimmed with tears. She touched his cheek, smiling through the emotion swelling in her chest. "We'll do it together. She's our responsibility now. Our family." Outside, the afternoon sun bathed the street in golden light. Michael, Emily, and Lily walked side by side, the girl holding both their hands as though afraid to let go. For years, Michael had carried only guilt and loss when he thought of family. Now, with Emily on one side and Lily on the other, he felt something entirely new. Hope. Months later, on a gray November morning, Michael suggested something he had avoided for years. "I want to take you both to see Daniel." His tone was steady, though his hands twisted together nervously. They drove back to Youngstown, the air crisp with the bite of early winter. The cemetery sat on a low hill outside town, quiet and still, leaves, brown and brittle, clinging stubbornly to bare branches. Michael carried a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, his steps heavy, as he led the way to a modest headstone carved with his brother's name, Daniel Harris, beloved son and brother. For a long moment he couldn't speak. He sank to his knees in front of the grave, his shoulders trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of years. "I should have been here. I should have protected you." Tears streaked down his face. He pressed his hand against the cold stone, his breath visible in the chill air. Emily knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his back. Lily stood close, silent but steady, her small hand resting on her brother's shoulder. "You didn't fail him," Emily murmured. "You've carried that guilt for too long. Daniel wouldn't want you to live this way. He'd want you to keep going, to protect Lily, to live the life you both dreamed of." Michael closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. For years he had carried the moment of his brother's death like a chain around his neck. But here, with his wife and sister beside him, he felt the weight begin to lift. The grief was still there. It always would be. But for the first time, it no longer defined him. As they stood, snowflakes began to fall, soft, delicate, the first of the season. The cemetery grew quiet, blanketed in a hush that felt almost holy. Emily slipped her hand into Michael's while Lily held the other. Together they stood before Daniel's grave, a family rebuilt from loss. Michael drew in a deep breath, the cold air sharpening his lungs, and let it out slowly. "I forgive myself," he whispered. It wasn't dramatic, not a proclamation shouted into the wind, but it was real, and it was enough. The three of them walked back to the car as the snow swirled gently around them, covering the ground in a thin white veil. It was the beginning of winter, but also for them, the beginning of something else, a new life defined not by what they had lost, but by what they had chosen to build together. For Emily, the moment carried a message she would never forget. Love and compassion could not erase tragedy, but they could transform it. They could take the sharpest pain and soften it, turning wounds into scars that no longer bled, but told a story of survival. And for Michael, the message was even simpler. Family was not the chaos he had been born into. It was the people who stood by him now. Emily steady and unyielding, and Lily fierce and unbreakable. Together they were proof that even the deepest wounds could heal. As the snow fell thicker, coating the earth in silence, Emily knew the truth. Love and forgiveness were stronger than grief. And in that truth, the Harris family found peace at last. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts and experiences.